They thought I'd beg 1 month before my 20-year pension vested, and they sent the termination email at 5:47 p.m. on a Friday. No warning, no meeting, just a cold, calculated execution. They didn't know I'd been preparing for this moment for 6 years. They didn't know I'd already counted every step from my desk to the exit. And they certainly didn't know that 4 weeks later, HR would be the ones trembling when they saw me walk back through those glass doors. My name is Lauren Whitaker, and after 19 years and 11 months with Ridgewell Systems, I learned exactly how much loyalty is worth in corporate America. Nothing. The email arrived while I was reviewing next quarter's operational forecasts. I almost missed it. Buried between a vendor update and someone's farewell party invitation. The subject line was deliberately vague. Organizational update, action required. I remember the exact temperature of the office that day, 68 degrees, because I just adjusted the thermostat. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune. Someone was microwaving fish in the break room again. Everything was perfectly, maddeningly normal. Dear Ms. Whitaker, it began. Not Lauren, not even the courtesy of my first name after nearly 2 decades. As part of our ongoing organizational optimization initiative, we regret to inform you that your position has been identified for elimination. Your termination will be effective in 2 weeks. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, the message was crystal clear, but because my brain refused to process the timing. 1 month. 31 days before I hit the 20-year mark that would guarantee my full pension benefits. The security cameras watched me read my professional death sentence. I wondered if someone in HR was monitoring my reaction, waiting to see if I'd storm into Heather Moxley's corner office. Our new head of human resources, all of 33 years old with her fresh MBA and her mission to streamline our human capital. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I closed the email, saved it to my personal folder, evidence, I thought even then, and continued working on the forecasts. My hands were steady, my breathing remained even, but inside, something fundamental shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like tectonic plates realigning before an earthquake. I'd joined Ridgewell when we had 40 employees and worked out of a converted warehouse. I'd built their operational systems from scratch, navigated us through the 2008 crisis when half our suppliers went under, kept production running during the pandemic when everyone else was scrambling. I'd turned down 3 headhunting offers in the last 5 years alone because I believed in loyalty. Because I was building something. Because I was 45 days away from a pension that would secure my future. The office emptied around me as evening fell. I sat in the growing darkness, not bothering with the lights. The email glowed on my screen, each word a calculated insult. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd beg. They thought I'd accept their generous severance package and fade away quietly. Another casualty of corporate efficiency. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea what I'd been planning. And they had no idea that I'd just received confirmation, 10 minutes before their email, that my other plan, my real plan, had just cleared its final hurdle. I'd given Ridgewell Systems the best years of my life, starting when the company was nothing more than 40 people and a dream about revolutionizing renewable energy infrastructure. Back in 2005, I was 26, fresh from my operations management program, and CEO Marcus Ridgewell himself interviewed me in what used to be a supply closet converted into a conference room. "We need someone who can build systems from nothing," he'd said, his eyes bright with the fever of true believers. "Someone who sees problems before they happen." I became that person. When our first major client threatened to pull out because we couldn't guarantee supply chain stability, I spent 3 months redesigning our entire procurement process. When the 2008 crisis hit and our primary component manufacturer went bankrupt overnight, I had already identified and vetted 4 backup suppliers. We were the only company in our sector that didn't miss a single delivery that year. During the pandemic, while our competitors hemorrhaged contracts, I orchestrated a remote operational system that actually increased our efficiency by 15%. The board called it the Whitaker Miracle. Marcus personally thanked me in front of the entire company over Zoom. said I was the backbone of Ridgewell Systems. That was 3 years ago. That was before Marcus retired and the board brought in fresh blood. Before Heather Moxley arrived with her PowerPoints about human capital optimization and age-diverse restructuring, I started noticing the changes 18 months ago. First, they stopped inviting me to strategic planning meetings. "We're trying to get fresh perspectives," they said. Then my direct reports were slowly reassigned to younger managers. Cross-functional experience, they called it. The real warning came when they hired Brad Morrison, 34, as Senior Director of Operational Excellence, a position that mysteriously overlapped with 80% of my responsibilities. They told me he was there to support me, to learn from the best. I wasn't stupid. I'd seen this playbook before with Sandra Martinez, who'd been let go 2 months before her pension vested. Then Robert Kim. 3 weeks before his, Janet Thompson, 40 days, David Osborne, 6 weeks. Always just shy of that magical 20-year mark. Always with the same clinical language about organizational optimization. But I'd done something none of them had. 6 years ago, when I first sensed the cultural shift. When the first efficiency consultant started prowling our halls, I began preparing, not just emotionally or financially, strategically. I incorporated Northway operations through a trust in Delaware, invisible to casual corporate searches. I began studying every aspect of Ridgewell's operational weaknesses, particularly in the logistics software we'd been promising to upgrade for 5 years, but never did. I networked carefully, selectively, with clients who'd expressed frustration with our legacy systems. Most importantly, I'd been quietly buying Ridgewell stock through various investment vehicles. Not enough to trigger disclosure requirements, I was too smart for that, but enough to matter when the time came. The official reason for my termination was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, position redundancy due to structural realignment focused on digital transformation initiatives. Translation: we hired someone younger and cheaper, and you're too expensive to keep around. But there was something Heather Moxley didn't know when she signed off on my termination. Something the board didn't know when they approved the Q4 cost optimization targets that specifically included reducing pension obligations. 3 hours before that email arrived, I'd received confirmation that Evelyn Hydro, Ridgewell's second largest client, responsible for 30% of our annual revenue, had agreed to a pilot program with Northway Operations, my company, my software, my solution to the problems I'd been documenting for years. The contract was already signed. The implementation would begin in 30 days, 2 weeks after my termination date. I looked at my desk, at the 19 Years of Achievement Awards, the photos with Marcus, the handwritten thank you notes from clients I'd saved from disaster. They thought they were cutting costs. They thought they were being clever, saving a few million in pension obligations. They had no idea they'd just lit the fuse on their own destruction. And the most beautiful part? Everything I was about to do would be perfectly legal, perfectly ethical, and perfectly devastating. They wanted to save money by stealing my pension. I was going to cost them everything. The first night after receiving my termination email, I didn't sleep. Not because I was crying or panicking. I lay in bed calculating, planning, feeling my initial shock crystallize into something harder and more useful: cold fury. By morning, I'd made 3 decisions. First, no emotional reactions at the office. Second, document everything. Third, accelerate my timeline. I went to work Monday as if nothing had happened, smiled at the security guard, made small talk about the weather, even stopped by Heather Moxley's office to discuss a smooth transition. She could barely meet my eyes, fidgeting with her MBA class ring while spouting rehearsed phrases about exciting new opportunities and appreciation for your contributions. "Of course," I said, my voice professionally neutral. "I want what's best for Ridgewell." The lie came so easily it surprised me. That evening, I met with 5 former Ridgewell employees at a wine bar downtown. Each had been terminated just before reaching a significant benefits milestone. Sandra Martinez was there, now working 3 part-time jobs to make ends meet. Robert Kim had depleted his savings, fighting a wrongful termination suit he couldn't afford to win. Janet Thompson's husband had delayed his cancer treatment because they'd lost their health insurance. They have a formula, Sandra said, her voice bitter. HR gets bonuses based on cost savings. Heather Moxley personally pocketed $50,000 last year for keeping benefit payouts under budget. I recorded everything, not openly. Connecticut was a two-party consent state. But I took detailed notes, names, dates, patterns. The way HR would suddenly discover performance issues with exemplary employees approaching pension eligibility. The way they'd create overlapping positions to justify redundancies. The way they'd time terminations to maximize financial damage while minimizing legal exposure. Why didn't you sue? I asked Robert. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. With what money? They know exactly how much legal action costs. They offer just enough severance to make you go away. With an NDA attached, fight them. And you get nothing while your bills pile up. That night, I called my lawyer. Not to sue, that was their game. Played on their terms. I had something different in mind. I want to establish a nonprofit, I told him. A professional association for veteran employees in the renewable energy sector. Everything above board, completely legitimate. Within a week, the Alliance for Renewable Energy Professionals was born. I funded it myself, quietly. Its stated mission was to provide networking and support for experienced workers in our industry. Its real purpose was to create a platform for sharing stories that Ridgewell's NDAs couldn't silence. I also hired a forensic accountant, not to investigate Ridgewell, that would tip my hand. Instead, I had them analyze publicly available data about companies with similar optimization patterns. The report was damning. Companies that systematically terminated employees before pension vesting saw average stock drops of 23% within 18 months when the practice became public. Meanwhile, at the office, I played my part perfectly. I trained Brad Morrison, documenting every process, every client relationship, every operational nuance. I was so helpful, so professional, that even Heather seemed to relax. She had no idea I was also meeting with Thomas Peterson, the investigative journalist from the Federal Ledger, feeding him a story about pension manipulation in corporate America. She had no idea that every process I documented for Brad contained subtle dependencies on systems that only Northway operations could provide. The anger never left me. It sat in my chest like a heated coal, keeping me warm, keeping me focused. But it had transformed from raw fury into something more useful. Determination. They thought I'd go quietly because that's what everyone did. They thought I'd be too proud to fight, too tired to resist, too afraid of losing my severance to make waves. They thought wrong. 3 days before my official termination, I submitted my final report on operational improvements. Buried in Appendix C was a casual mention of the upcoming vendor transition for our logistics software. Nobody read appendices. Nobody except Evelyn Hydro, who I'd copied on the report as a courtesy. The trap was set. All that remained was to wait for them to walk into it. My exit plan had been 6 years in the making, born the day I watched them force out Patricia Williams, our former CFO, just 2 months before her full retirement benefits kicked in. That night, sitting in my home office, I'd made a decision. If corporate loyalty was dead, then I needed to build my own lifeboat. Not just a backup plan, a complete parallel structure that could operate independently when the time came. Northway Operations started as just a legal entity. A Delaware LLC owned by a trust that couldn't be traced back to me without significant digging. I funded it slowly, carefully, using bonuses and stock options I'd earned over the years. To anyone looking, it would appear to be just another small tech startup in the renewable energy space. The real genius was in the positioning. I didn't create a competitor to Ridgewell. That would have violated my employment agreement. Instead, I created a specialized logistics software company that filled the exact gap Ridgewell had been ignoring for years. The gap I'd been documenting in report after report that management dismissed as not a current priority. For 3 years, I'd quietly built relationships with frustrated clients. Not poaching. Never that. Just listening when they vented about system delays, integration problems, the logistics bottlenecks that cost them millions. I'd sympathize, take notes, and file everything away. You know what you need, I'd told Mark Stevens, COO of Evelyn Hydro, over drinks at an industry conference last year. A middleware solution that actually talks to legacy systems without requiring a complete infrastructure overhaul. Exactly, he'd said. But Ridgewell keeps promising updates that never materialize. Shame there's no third-party solution, I'd replied, letting him draw his own conclusions. By the time I received my termination email, Northway had a fully developed product. A team of 3 brilliant developers I'd recruited from companies Ridgewell had burned, and a sales pipeline worth potentially $150 million over 5 years. All completely legal, all completely ethical, all completely devastating to a company that had taken their operational infrastructure for granted. The master stroke was the timing. I'd incorporated a clause in Northway's operating agreement that prevented me from actively running the company while employed elsewhere. But the moment my termination became effective, I could step in as CEO. The board, consisting of myself and 2 trusted allies, had already approved the motion. The paperwork was ready. I'd also been feeding intelligence to our competitors. Nothing proprietary, nothing that violated my NDA. Just casual observations about market opportunities, mentions of client frustrations, suggestions about where to focus their sales efforts. Ridgewell's new business pipeline had mysteriously dried up over the past 6 months. They blamed market conditions. They never suspected the calls were coming from inside the house. My cryptocurrency investments, purchased with my annual bonuses and hidden behind multiple digital wallets, had grown to just over $2 million. My real estate holdings, acquired through various LLCs, generated enough passive income to cover my expenses indefinitely. I didn't need Ridgewell's pension anymore. But this wasn't about need, this was about justice. 2 days before my last day, I sent an email to 12 key clients. Subject line: Transition update and future opportunities. I professionally informed them of my departure, thanked them for years of partnership, and mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that I'd be available for consulting through my new venture, Northway Operations, should they need assistance with logistics optimization. Within 4 hours, I had 7 responses. Within 8 hours, I had 3 meeting requests. Brad Morrison stopped by my office that afternoon, sweat beading on his forehead. Lauren, about these client relationships. I'm noticing some complexity in the handoff documentation. I smiled warmly. Oh, don't worry. Everything's in the files, though you might want to pay special attention to sections 47 through 93. That's where the real nuances are. There were no sections 47 through 93, but he'd spend weeks looking for them. On my final day, I packed my box slowly, methodically. 19 years reduced to a single banker's box. I left my achievement awards on the desk. They meant nothing now. As I walked out, I passed Heather Moxley in the hall. She actually had the audacity to smile and say, "Best of luck, Lauren." "Oh, I don't need luck," I replied. "I have something much better." "What's that?" "A plan." The moment I walked out of Ridgewell's building, I transformed from Lauren Whitaker, terminated employee, into Lauren Whitaker, architect of destruction. My first stop was a FedEx office where a package was waiting, incorporation documents making me official CEO of Northway Operations, effective immediately. That weekend, I compiled everything. 19 years of emails, carefully preserved on personal backups. Documentation of every time management ignored critical infrastructure improvements. Records of HR's optimization patterns. Financial analyses showing the correlation between employee terminations and quarterly bonuses. All legally obtained, all devastatingly relevant. I separated the information into 3 packages. The first went to the Alliance for Renewable Energy Professionals, our newly formed nonprofit. The second went to Thomas Peterson at the Federal Ledger, marked Embargo until Thursday. The third, and most comprehensive, went to Ridgewell's board of directors via certified mail. with a simple cover letter. Dear board members, I believe you should be aware of certain patterns in your human resources practices that may expose the company to significant legal and reputational risk. Please find enclosed documentation spanning 5 years. This is provided as a courtesy from a concerned former employee. No response is necessary. I didn't threaten. I didn't accuse. I simply presented facts and let their lawyers' imaginations run wild. Monday morning, the Alliance website went live. The homepage featured a simple counter. Combined years of experience lost to optimization, 347. Below it, anonymized stories from former employees. Sandra's diabetes medication that she now couldn't afford. Robert's son's college fund, depleted fighting wrongful termination. Janet's husband's delayed treatment. We were careful. Every story was factual, documented, and legally vetted. No company names were mentioned. We didn't need to. Anyone in our industry would recognize the patterns. By Tuesday, LinkedIn was buzzing. The hashtag, during 347 years, loss started trending in corporate circles. People began sharing their own stories. HR professionals from other companies chimed in, distancing themselves from such practices. A few brave souls still at Ridgewell even liked and shared posts, using their personal accounts. Wednesday. I held my first official meeting as Northway's CEO with Mark Stevens from Evelyn Hydro. We met at their headquarters, a deliberate choice. I wanted Ridgewell's sales team to see my car in their second biggest client's parking lot. Lauren, I have to be honest, Mark said. We've been frustrated with Ridgewell's systems for 2 years. But switching vendors is a big decision. I opened my laptop. Let me show you something. This is a real-time demonstration of how our middleware can reduce your processing time by 60%. His eyes widened as I ran through the demo. Everything Ridgewell had promised but never delivered, working flawlessly. How soon can you implement? We could start Monday. That fast? I smiled. I've been preparing for this opportunity for some time. Thursday morning, Thomas Peterson's article dropped. The Pension Trap: How Companies Weaponize Loyalty. The piece was a masterwork of investigative journalism, featuring data from 12 companies showing systematic termination of employees approaching benefit milestones. Ridgewell wasn't named directly, but the details were unmistakable to anyone who knew the industry. The article included a particularly damning statistic. Companies engaging in these practices saw an average talent drain of 31% within 2 years as remaining employees lost faith in leadership. Stock prices typically followed within 6 months. That afternoon, my phone rang. Ridgewell's general counsel. Ms. Whitaker, we've received your package. We'd like to discuss. There's nothing to discuss, I interrupted. That information is simply a courtesy. What you do with it is your business. You understand you have obligations under your separation agreement, which I followed to the letter. Have a good day. I hung up and turned back to my computer. 3 more client meetings scheduled for next week. 7 resumes from top-tier Ridgewell engineers asking about opportunities at Northway. And an interview request from Bloomberg. Would you comment on the growing trend of pension manipulation in corporate America? I declined the interview. My work would speak for itself. That evening, I met with the Alliance members for our first official gathering. 43 former employees from various companies, all with similar stories. As we talked, planned, and organized, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Purpose? They'd tried to steal my future. Instead, they'd given me a mission. Within 2 weeks of leaving Ridgewell, I had orchestrated a perfect storm that would reshape the industry landscape and Ridgewell's future. The Evelyn Hydro contract was just the beginning. When Mark Stevens signed our $47 million, 3-year agreement, he did something I hadn't expected but had desperately hoped for. He called his counterpart at Zenith Solar, Ridgewell's 3rd largest client. You need to see what Northway's doing, he told them. It's everything we've been begging Ridgewell for since 2019. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. By week 3, I had signed letters of intent worth $112 million. Each client had the same story: years of promises from Ridgewell, zero delivery, and now a solution that actually worked. But the financial assault was only half of my strategy. The real damage came from the talent exodus I had carefully cultivated. Jennifer Walsh, Ridgewell's top systems architect, called me on a Tuesday evening. "Lauren, I saw the Alliance website. I had no idea about the pattern. They're doing it to us too. Anyone over 45 is suddenly getting performance improvement plans." "I'm sorry to hear that, Jen." "Don't be sorry. Be hiring. I've got 4 others who want out. Good people. Young people who see what's happening and don't want to be part of it." Within 10 days, I had poached, legally, ethically, with full compensation packages, 12 of Ridgewell's best engineers, not just the veterans they were pushing out, but the young talent who saw the writing on the wall. The brain drain was catastrophic. Then came the shareholders' meeting. I'd been tracking Ridgewell's stock through my various holdings. When the Federal Ledger article hit, combined with rumors of client defections, the stock dropped 11%. When news of the talent exodus leaked, another 8%. But the real blow came when an anonymous whistleblower, definitely not me, sent the board's own emails about pension optimization strategies to a shareholder activism group. The activist investors smelled blood. They called for an emergency shareholders meeting, demanding answers about systematic value destruction through human capital mismanagement. I attended via proxy. My shares voted through 3 different investment vehicles. The meeting was brutal. Shareholders grilled the board about liability exposure, reputational damage, and the suspicious pattern of pre-vesting terminations. One investor calculated that saving $50 million in pension obligations had cost the company $400 million in market value. "Who's responsible for this strategy?" demanded Margaret Zhao, representing CalPERS pension fund. All eyes turned to Heather Moxley. But I wasn't done. The same week, Northway announced a revolutionary partnership program. We would provide free middleware integration to any company willing to commit to ethical employment practices, verified by third-party audit. The press release practically wrote itself. Northway Operations leads industry in linking technology, innovation with corporate responsibility. Bloomberg picked it up, then Reuters. Then the Wall Street Journal ran an opinion piece. "When vendors become conscience. The Northway model." Ridgewell's board tried to respond. They announced a comprehensive review of HR practices and promised renewed commitment to our valued employees. Too little, too late. The narrative had already shifted. My favorite moment came when Brad Morrison called me, panic evident in his voice. "Lauren, I'm drowning here. The documentation you left? I can't make sense of the client management protocols. Evelyn Hydro is threatening to pull their entire contract, not just logistics. Could you maybe consult?" "Brad," I interrupted gently. "I'm afraid that would be a conflict of interest. Northway is now their logistics provider. But I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're the Senior Director of Operational Excellence. After all." The silence on the other end was delicious. 3 weeks after my termination, Ridgewell's stock had dropped 26%. They'd lost 3 major clients to competitors, not even to me. Just competitors who sensed weakness. Their talent pipeline was decimated. And the board was facing a shareholder lawsuit over fiduciary negligence. All because they wanted to save a few million on my pension. I signed the papers to take Northway public via SPAC merger. Valuation, $450 million. My stake, 47%. They'd stolen 20 years of loyalty. I'd taken their future. The industry conference at the Grand Hyatt was exactly 1 month after my termination, 31 days since they'd tried to rob me of 20 years' worth of earned benefits. Evelyn Hydro was hosting their annual Renewable Energy Summit, and as their newest strategic partner, Northway Operations had a prime exhibition spot. I wore my best suit, the same charcoal Armani I'd worn to my first board presentation at Ridgewell 15 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. The convention floor buzzed with familiar faces. Former colleagues who nodded respectfully. Competitors who suddenly wanted to chat. Clients who sought me out to congratulate me on Northway's innovative solutions. I was in my element, demonstrating our middleware platform to a crowd of impressed CTOs when I saw her. Heather Moxley stood frozen by the elevator banks, clutching a banker's box. Her usually perfect makeup was smudged, her designer blazer wrinkled. The box in her arms contained the detritus of corporate termination, a few framed certificates, a wilted desk plant, the same MBA class ring she'd been fidgeting with when she'd discussed my smooth transition. Our eyes met across the gleaming marble floor. She started to turn away, but something, maybe dignity, maybe desperation, made her walk toward me instead. The crowd around my booth seemed to sense the tension, conversations trailing off as she approached. I excused myself from a potential client and met her halfway, in the open space between the exhibition halls. "Hello, Heather." Up close, I could see the defeat in her eyes. The board had needed a sacrificial lamb when the shareholder lawsuit hit. Who better than the architect of the pension optimization strategy? "Did you know?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "When you sent that package to the board, did you know they'd blame me?" I considered lying. It would have been kinder. But she hadn't been kind when she'd signed my termination, when she'd calculated down to the day how to deprive me of my pension. "I knew they'd blame someone," I said evenly. "It was always going to be whoever left the most obvious paper trail. You were very thorough in your documentation. Heather, all those emails about cost savings opportunities and benefit liability reduction, very detailed." Her hands tightened on the box. "I was just doing what they asked, following the board's directive to cut costs." "Funny. That's exactly what the guards said at Nuremberg." She flinched. Around us, people pretended not to watch while obviously watching. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked. "To destroy everything? To hurt people?" I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but clear. "You systematically targeted employees weeks before their pensions vested. Sandra Martinez's husband died because they couldn't afford his medication after you fired her. Robert Kim's son dropped out of college. Janet Thompson lost her house. That wasn't personal. Neither is this." I cut her off. "This is business, Heather. Just optimization, just restructuring, just the natural consequence of treating loyalty like a liability on a balance sheet." She swayed slightly, and for a moment I thought she might drop the box. "They're being investigated now. The Department of Labor, the EEOC, they say there might be criminal charges for the executives involved." I heard. "Is that you're doing too?" I smiled. The same professional smile I'd worn for 19 years and 11 months. "I'm just a software vendor. Heather, I don't control what investigators choose to investigate, though I imagine those very detailed emails of yours made their job easier. You're enjoying this?" "No," I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. "I'm not enjoying it, but I'm not sorry either. You had a choice. You could have said no. You could have pushed back. You could have treated people with dignity. You chose your bonus instead." She looked down at her box, then back at me. "For what it's worth, Ms. Whitaker." A young man in an Evelyn Hydro badge appeared at my elbow. "Mr. Stevens is ready for your presentation to the board." Perfect timing. I nodded to him, then looked back at Heather one last time. "Good luck with your job search," I said. "Though you might find the market challenging. Word travels fast in our industry." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with her banker's box and her regrets. I didn't look back. I'd already spent too much time looking backward. The future was waiting in Conference Room A, where Evelyn Hydro's board wanted to discuss expanding our contract. Justice served at exactly the right temperature. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of Northway's new Austin headquarters, watching the afternoon sun paint the city skyline gold. We'd taken over 3 floors of a gleaming tower, far from Ridgewell's Connecticut fortress, far from everything that had tried to diminish me. The Wall Street Journal lay folded on my desk inside, its headline visible through the glass. Ridgewell Systems agrees to $47 million settlement in pension manipulation case. Below it, a smaller story. Former HR executive Heather Moxley turns whistleblower in federal investigation. I'd built something greater than revenge. Northway now employed 73 people, including 15 former Ridgewell employees who'd been pushed out before their benefits vested. We offered the most generous pension plan in the industry, fully vested after just 5 years. Our client list read like a who's who of renewable energy, and our latest valuation topped $800 million. But that wasn't what I thought about as I watched the city pulse with life below. I thought about Sandra Martinez, who now headed our customer success division, finally able to afford her husband's care in his final months. About Robert Kim's son, who'd returned to college with a full scholarship from the Northway Foundation. About Janet Thompson, whose new position as our VP of Operations came with a signing bonus that let her buy back her family home. My assistant knocked and entered. "Ms. Whitaker, the Journal reporter is here for your interview. Send them in." The reporter was young, eager, armed with questions about our meteoric rise and innovative business model. But her last question caught me off guard. "Looking back, do you have any regrets about how things ended with Ridgewell?" I considered the question, thinking about the company that had been my life for nearly 20 years. Ridgewell's stock had recovered somewhat after the settlement, but they'd never regained their position as industry leader. Too much talent lost, too much trust destroyed, too much damage to their reputation. Regret implies I had better choices, I finally answered. They created a game where loyalty was punished and exploitation was rewarded. I simply chose to play by their rules, but with better strategy. "And the pension you lost?" I smiled. "They took away a pension worth maybe $2 million over my lifetime. My Northway equity is currently valued at $376 million. I'd say I optimized my outcome." The reporter left with her story, but I remained on the balcony as evening fell. My phone buzzed with messages, a potential acquisition offer, an invitation to speak at Harvard Business School, a note from Mark Stevens about recommending us to 3 more major clients. I ignored them all, instead pulling up an email I'd been drafting for weeks. 2. All Northway employees. Subject: Our values, our future team. Today marks 6 months since Northway's founding. In that time, we've proven that a company can succeed not despite treating people well, but because of it. Each of you joined us believing in something more than profit margins and quarterly targets. You believed that business could be both successful and ethical. That loyalty should be rewarded, not exploited. We've built more than a company. We've built a promise that no one who gives their best years to Northway will ever be discarded for a line item on a balance sheet. This is our revolution, not with protests or lawsuits, but with proof that there's a better way. Thank you for believing. Lauren. I hit send and watched the Austin lights twinkle to life below. Somewhere in Connecticut, Ridgewell's executives were probably in another emergency board meeting, trying to salvage what remained of their company culture. Somewhere, other HR departments were quietly revising their termination policies, suddenly aware that actions had consequences. But I was here, building the future I'd been denied. They'd wanted to save money on my pension. Instead, they'd funded my transformation from employee to entrepreneur, from victim to victor. They taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. In corporate America, the only loyalty that matters is loyalty to yourself. I walked back inside, past the awards and accolades accumulating on my office walls. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that success and ethics weren't mutually exclusive. But tonight, I'd simply savor the view from the top. The retirement they'd tried to steal, I'd built something infinitely better. I didn't need their 20-year pension. I'd taken their future and made it mine. Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and ultimate justice. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace loyalty and standing up for what's right. Your experiences and perspectives make our community richer.